Mhm. Oh boy. All right. It's late, man. What's going on, everybody? George Osei back at it again. Another video representing Honesty Lies Here blog. Check it out. Don't check it out. I don't care. So, um, my guy Donnie T got elected in office and he started filling up his cabinet with some very interesting outside of the political norm people. Two in particular, Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, both businessmen, both guys I I don't trust that much at all. Even the left have even went as far as saying that Elon is the secret president because the left knows what it looks like when the president elect is really not running shows. But for some reason, this time they're going to pretend that they don't know this. Or better yet, they're going to use that experience that they didn't want anyone to talk about with Joe Nicholslick and compare and contrast, right? Now, Vivek, he went on a TV show, had an interview of some sort where he explained immigration and culture. Now, I think, hold on now. Do I have? Oh no, let me still present my findings. I think I have that tweet. Damn. I don't think I could find it. But he was explaining why people or companies hire immigrants, right? He talked about these companies are looking for a particular type of culture, a particular type of mindset, where these guys care more about outcomes and producing and trying to be better, and they're open to competition, and they're not really finding that over here in America. And part of it was true if you look at it from a surface level, but the question was really about, should immigrants really be a priority over American citizens? And the red whites, the woke right, they had a hissy fit. They believe that the DEI initiative should apply to them. Yet, most of these white people don't even have the skills or the intelligence to even do some of these jobs. And the interesting thing about this election here is that it caused a fracture within the Republican Party, which some people would celebrate. But if you know history, you know the Republican Party is always um, has always been fractured, no matter how you want to slice it. But this is interesting because now it seems like it's a tech America part of the Republican Party versus the blue collar part of the Republican Party. And they're clashing. And I'm going to, hey, listen, this ain't my battle. And a wise man once said that if it ain't your battle, just pick the winner. And the winner is going to be tech. And if whoever knows the tech, STEM, all that, you're going to win. Trust and believe that. But it was very interesting seeing the red whites complain about inequality from the government while ignoring the fact that black people have been complaining about inequality in the government. And you know what the white people have said? Just pull yourself up by those bootstraps. So, from, I guess, black America to the red whites, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Now, this video isn't to dump on the whites. I don't feel like doing that. This video It's about a very interesting article by Naeem Way from the Median. Playing victim or victimized. We're gonna go through this video right here. I mean this article. Yeah, I know I gotta read. I know, but this is worth learning. Introduction: The myth of the rugged individualism. Rugged individualism, the also cherished idea of self-reliance, or as it's called in the Black community, do for self, often serves as the backbone of American right-wing ideology. It is the notion that success only through hard work, ingenuity, and perseverance. Meritocracy. However, this narrative collapses when scrutinized in the context of American freedmen, descendants of persons emancipated. After the Civil War, the U.S. government promised formerly enslaved people the means to build a new life, specifically the infamous 40 acres and a mule. Yet, under Andrew Johnson's administration, Reconstruction policies were reversed, stripped freemen of any chance to accumulate wealth. This is all true. Conversely, Europeans, American saltine whites, benefited from government programs like the Homestead Act and the GI Bill. Oh, the Homestead Act, I think it gets into this. That bill was crazy. It served as direct wealth building handouts. This dichotomy laid the foundation for today's wealth gap. Right wing arguments dismiss these systemic inequalities as victim mentality, but the evidence tells a different story. American freedmen are not playing the victim. They are victims of deliberate and enduring oppression by those in control of the American socioeconomic ecosystem. In many ways, the meritocracy talking point serves as a tool to maintain the existing system of inequality. It acts as a red meat argument tossed to a predominantly racist or xenophobic base, conveniently sidestepping two critical realities. First, it ignores the history of systemic partiality crafted and enforced by those in control of the system's levers. This partiality ensured that opportunities, resources, and protections were disproportionately funneled towards white Americans, while freedmen were deliberately excluded and oppressed. Why? Because freedmen were technically not American citizens. But let's continue. Second, it disregards the numerous government handouts that significantly boasted white Americans and immigration groups, as Ira Katznelson meticulously outlined in his book, When Affirmative Action Was White. Uh-oh. These programs include the Homestead Act, the GI Bills, and the federally subsidized housing, gave white Americans a leg up, effectively propelling them and subsequent immigrant groups far ahead of the American freedmen who were barred from accessing these same benefits. By promoting the illusion of meritocracy while obscuring this historical favoritism, the argument becomes a smokescreen from sustaining the intentional racial and economic hierarchies, reinforces system inequalities under the guise of fairness with statements like the age-old, everybody has the same opportunities in America. The broken promise, 40 acres and a mule. What if freedmen had received the 40 acres they were promised? Scholars estimate the cumulative worth of this land, adjusted for inflation, would exceed several $1 trillion today. This potential wealth could have been the bedrock of generational prosperity for millions of American freedmen. Instead, the land was confiscated or redistributed to white Americans, ensuring that the freedmen were locked out of economic opportunities from the start. White Americans, however, were granted vast tracts of lands under the Homestead Act, a blatant welfare program masked as meritocracy. Approximately 270 million acres of land were distributed to 1.6 million white families, creating wealth for over 40 million whites that were passed down through generations. This government largest, Legarcy, damn, I was on a roll too, was foundational to white prosperity in a stark contrast to the denial of freedmen American rights. Right-wing arguments, instances like this, where the government provided Europeans Immigrants with the tools to build enduring generational wealth in the United States are conveniently overlooked, replaced instead by the same lame, tired rhetoric that blames the victims. Systematic disposition and financial exclusion. Yo, Naeem is cooking right now. The deprivation didn't stop with land. Policies throughout the 20th centuries further compounded the exclusion of freedmen from wealth building opportunities. Below is a rough calculation of total wealth loss experienced by American freedom nationwide due to systemic exclusion from housing, the GI Bill, and predatory banking practices. These figures incorporate broader national trends and cumulative losses over the generations. Housing partiality. Nationwide, housing discrimination, including redlining, restrictive covenants, and devaluation of Black neighborhoods, as they were called, systemically robbed American freedmen of home ownership opportunities. The home ownership gap. According to the Urban Institute, the home ownership gap between Black and white Americans has remained around 30 percentage points for decades. Wealth impact. Median home values for white homeowners were approximately 237,000. If 2 million freedmen families had achieved home ownership partially since the 1930s, their cumulative home equity today would approximately be 460 billion. This figure represents the wealth they could have passed down through generations. Home ownership gap. US Black home ownership rates remain below 45%. Whites approach 75%. Look at that. See Black all the way at the bottom. Black was climbing up and then it kind of tails off, right? It's from the US Census Bureau. Look at this. The GI Bill. Exclusion from the GI Bill benefits disproportionately affected Black veterans who are unable to access affordable housing loans, higher education, and economic stability. Looking at the statistics below, the question must be asked, were these freedmen who served their country that could not get ahead due to spending prime years in the military or some debilitating injury during wartime service playing victim, or were they victimized? Education and home ownership laws. Approximately 1.2 million Black veterans served in World War II but were largely denied GI Bill benefits. If 1 million of these veterans had received equitable access similar to their white counterparts, they could have collectively gained $80,000 to $100,000 each in the home equity and educational advancements by today. This will amount be 100 billion in wealth accumulation over time. Intergenerational growth. Adding the compound effects of intergenerational wealth, the total losses attributable to exclusion of the GI Bill likely exceed 300 billion. Predatory banking. Oh yeah, Naeem is cooking right now, bruv. Exclusive from fair banking systems combined with exploitative lending practices like subprime mortgages deprive American freedmen of wealth building opportunities nationwide. Mortgage discrimination. The Citigroup study estimated 113 billion in direct losses from discriminatory lending practices over the last 20 years alone. Compounded wealth loss, adjusted for long-term wealth growth and nationwide scale, this figure likely approaches 300 billion to 400 billion. When considering how home equity and investments could have appreciated if access to fair credit have been granted over the last 70 years. Look at this. Assets by race and ethnicity. Whites held slightly more than 100 trillion in assets at the end of Q1 in 2020. Look at that. Look at that. Total nationwide wealth loss of these three aspects alone, combine these figures, housing discrimination 460 billion, GI Bill exclusion 300 billion, predatory banking between 300 to 400 billion. Cumulative total wealth loss approximately 1.06 trillion to 1.16 trillion. When adjusted for intergenerational growth, this wealth will likely exceed 2 trillion today, underscoring the staggering cost of systemic exclusion and discrimination against American freedmen. When you add land stolen from freedmen by private citizens and government, along with the reneging 40 acres promised emancipated persons, the total estimated wealth loss is an extra 1.8 trillion to 1.85 trillion. This is in fact victimization. Stolen ingenuity, the exploitation of freedmen, creativity, and its generational impact. The theft of freedmen ingenuity is a glaring example of a systemic victimization where even the extraordinary talents and contributions of American freedmen were exploited for the benefits of others. Throughout American history, freedmen inventors, entrepreneurs, and visionaries produced groundbreaking ideas and creation, only have the fruits of their labor stolen by the European American white man who wielded social, legal, and economic power. For instance, many inventions by American freedmen were patented under the names of white employers or associates, stripping freedmen of the credit and financial benefits that could have transformed their lives and their families' futures. Innovations in agriculture, transportation, and even household products, many of which were conceived by black creators, became the foundation for white owned businesses that built empires and ensured generational wealth for their descendants. Meanwhile, the families of these inventors were left to languish in poverty, denied the opportunity to reap the rewards of their ancestors' brilliance. Is there no victim here? To claim otherwise is to ignore the deliberate and systemic exploitation that robbed American freedmen not only of their rightful recognition and financial security, but also of their ability to pass wealth and opportunities to their progeny. These injustices are not mere footnotes in history, they are foundational to the wealth disparities that persist to this day. Dismissing this reality as playing a victim is cruel erasure of truth and an insult to the resilience of those who, despite every obstacle, continue to create, innovate, and persevere. Cost of hate and neglect. Racial violence, economic sabotage have always gone hand in hand. The latest FBI data confirms that African Americans experience the highest number of hate crimes in the U.S., and this violence has long been used to enforce economic disenfranchisement. From the Tulsa Race Massacre to the systemic death of the Black farmland, as detailed by the New Republic, these acts of terror rob freedmen of economic security. A Citigroup study estimates that systemic racism has cost the U.S. economy 16 trillion since the year 2000 alone. Losses to freedmen throughout stolen land, diminishes earning potential, denied opportunities are incalculable. That's right. This sounds like they violated the Constitution like several times, especially the Commerce Clause. Anywho, government sanctioned white wealth. While freedmen faced systemic barriers, white Americans received direct government assistance to build wealth. Homestead Act, as mentioned earlier, federal subsidies from agricultural subsidies to highway construction projects, federal programs have disproportionately benefited white Americans. Corporate welfare, the government has consistently prioritized industries dominated by white business owners, further widening the wealth gap. These programs are not examples of rugged individualism, but blatant handouts that were instrumental in creating and sustaining white wealth. It's cool when they do it, the double standard of government welfare. In the words of Tennessee rapper Finesse 2 Times, it's cool when they do it, it's a problem when I do it. This sentiment encapsulates the glaring double standard in how government welfare programs were distributed and perceived across racial lines. Whites reaped enormous benefits from New Deal programs in the 1930s, while freedmen were largely excluded, ensuring their wealth remained stagnant. The New Deal, hailed as a transformational moment in American social policy, disproportionately favored white Americans. Programs like Social Security and unemployment insured excluded agricultural and domestic workers, industries where freedmen were overrepresented. The Rust Belt flourished under these government handouts, which stimulated industrial growth and created a burgeoning middle class, but freedmen were systemically locked out of these opportunities. When freedmen finally began to access welfare benefits decades later, the political and social narratives surrounding these programs shifted dramatically. White Americans, particularly in the South, vehemently protested, labeling these benefits as handouts that enabled dependency. Southern politicians responded by successfully slashing welfare provisions, ensuring that what freedmen received was a fraction of what whites had already gained from the same programs. This hypocritical backlash underscores how welfare programs were weaponized to maintain racial hierarchies. For whites, government assistance was a stepping stone to prosperity. For freedmen, it was met with hostility and stripped to their bearers of crumb. This disparity not only reveals a double standard, but highlights the systemic efforts to deny freedmen the same pathways to economic security that whites freely enjoy. How can one claim meritocracy when the government provided an undeniable hand up to certain groups while deliberately excluding others? The very foundation of white wealth in America owes much to government intervention, whether through the New Deal, the Homestead Act, the GI Bill, all of which created a scaffolding for white prosperity. Freedmen, meanwhile, were systemically locked out of these programs, ensuring they started from a position of disadvantage. If the playing fields was never level to begin with, and one group received assistance to climb while another was deliberately held down, calling the system a meritocracy is not just inaccurate, it's a farcical. The myth of meritocracy became a convenient tool to mask the truth of inequality and to justify the continued denial of justice to those who were systemically denied their fair share. The legacy of benign neglect. I heard it read both ways. The uncodified policy of benign neglect, popularized during the Nixon administration, still defines the treatment of freedmen economic needs. Under this approach, racists who operate within the system locking out the freedmen is ignored, and the policies are crafted in a way to avoid directly addressing these disparities under the pretense that they will. This indifference perpetuates the wealth prosperity of freedmen, leaving them at a systematic disadvantage. Even the idea of meritocracy, the belief that success is achieved through talent, hard work, and ability, was systematically undermined by racism, which created barriers that prevented American freedmen from competing on a level playing field. Advocates of meritocracy avers that opportunities are equally accessible to all and that no helping hand should be given to the freedmen who find themselves every generation started from scratch. Many of these meritocracy proponents, many point to Michael Jordan, Oprah Winfrey, or other such billionaire outliers in niche markets like maybe a Jay-Z or Kanye West. Yay. But for American freedmen as a whole, races operating within the system perverted this principle at every turn. Education. Public schools for Black children were chronically underfunded and segregated, producing unequal educational outcomes. Higher education opportunities were also limited, with most prestigious universities excluding freedmen students. Even when historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, offered alternatives, they operate on a significantly smaller budget than the predominantly white institutions, restricting access to resources. Employment. Skilled trades and professions were often closed to American freedmen due to discriminatory hiring practices, labor union exclusion, and outright hostility in workplaces. Employers frequently reserved the best jobs for white workers, relegating black workers to low-paying, unstable positions regardless of their qualifications. Housing and credit. Home ownership, a cornerstone of the American dream and a key avenue for wealth building, was inaccessible for many American freedmen due to redlining, discriminatory lending practices, and restrictive covenants. Black applicants were often denied loans outright or offered subprime mortgages even when they had the same credit worthiness as white applicants. Legal and political system. Laws and policies that could have leveled the playing field were either intentionally discriminatory or poorly enforced. For instance, civil rights protections were often circumvented by local government or businesses, leaving American freedmen vulnerable to exploitation despite legal advancements. Racial violence. Even when American freedmen succeeded despite these obstacles, acts of racial violence often nullified their achievements. Incidents like the destruction of Black Wall Street in Tulsa and countless lynchings served to quash economic progress and reinforce racial hierarchies. Meritocracy cannot thrive in an environment where the rules of the game are rigged. Structural racism ensured that American freedmen, regardless of their individual merit, were systematically excluded from opportunities that were freely accessible to white Americans. These barriers were not incidental but deliberate, designed to maintain the economic and social dominance of whiteness. In this way, the very concept of meritocracy was rendered hollow by perversive groups of racism. Conclusion. To deny the structural victimization of American freedmen is to ignore the historical road. Far from embracing victimhood, freedmen have preserved despite centuries of systematic oppression. The evidence demands a reckoning, not just in form of acknowledgement, but intangible remedial measures. I'm doing my best here with this reading thing. Right-wing narrative that freedmen must pull themselves up by their bootstraps is a cruel irony. For centuries, freedmen have been denied boots, straps, and the very ground on which to stand. Addressing these injustices isn't about assigning blame, it's about fulfilling the broken promises of Reconstruction rooted in true equality and ensuring a fair chance for American freedmen like all other Americans. Asking today's freedmen to forget how the government systemically uplifted white Americans and immigrant groups while maintaining a policy of benign neglect towards our people is not just unjust, it is a continuation of white supremacist ideology cloaked in a modern rhetoric. True progress demands an honest reckoning with this history and tangible steps towards equity. We will rise when we replace the term victim with victors. Whew. Man, why did I read all that? Very simple. If it happens to the Black community, it can happen to every community. And we're seeing that today. You're seeing the news clippings and the headlines that you have immigrants getting buku loads of cash, buying up property, cleaning out grocery stores, and not even Black neighborhoods. These are in the white neighborhoods, the blue collar neighborhoods. The white man's in survival mode. What are they going to do? Are they going to uphold the same government that has set precedents that oppression is definitely on the table? Or will they rebel? But Black people are not going to help them. We're just going to tell them, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Anyway, that's enough for me. Did a lot of reading. Wherever you see this, like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, y'all have a good night.